The first time my future daughter-in-law called the boatyard worthless. She did it with a champagne glass in her hand and 43 people listening. We were standing on the terrace of the Harbor Crest Hotel in Camden, Maine, the night before my only son was supposed to marry her. Behind us, sailboats rocked in the dark water, and the last orange strip of sunset had disappeared behind the hills. Vanessa Cole looked beautiful enough for a magazine cover, all polished hair, white silk, and the kind of smile that never seemed to reach her eyes when she looked at me. She had been talking to 3 of her father's friends about waterfront redevelopment when one of them asked whether I still owned Bennett Marine Works on the south side of the harbor. Vanessa laughed before I could answer. Technically, she said, putting 2 fingers in the air like quotation marks. Caleb's dad owns that old place with the rusted sheds. Nobody would call it a real marina anymore. A few people gave the careful little chuckle strangers use when they are not sure whether they have permission to laugh. I smiled because I had spent 67 years learning that silence tells you more about a room than anger ever does. Vanessa went on. Honestly, Arthur, I don't know why you keep hanging on to it. It's basically 30 years of engine oil and rotting pilings. My dad says the harbor would finally look respectable if somebody redeveloped that whole strip. Her father, Richard Cole, stood 6 feet away, pretending to study his drink. Caleb's jaw tightened. I saw it because I was looking at him, not Vanessa. He had that same tell when he was 8 years old and trying not to cry after striking out in Little League. I set my glass on the table and said, "Your father is welcome to think whatever he likes about my property." Vanessa tilted her head. See? That's what I mean. Property. Everything with you is so sentimental. It's just land. That hurt more than I expected, because Bennett Marine Works had never been just land. My wife, Ellen, and I bought the first half-acre in 1983 with a loan no sensible banker should have approved. I rebuilt the original shed with my own hands. Ellen ran invoices at a folding desk under a leaking roof while Caleb slept in a playpen beside the parts cabinet. We repaired fishing boats, lobster boats, tour boats, Coast Guard tenders, anything that could float long enough to reach us. When Ellen died 7 years ago, I stopped going into the office for nearly a month because her handwriting was still on sticky notes tucked between the ledgers. Vanessa knew some of that. She just did not care. Before I could answer, Caleb stepped between us and said, "Vanessa, that's enough." She rolled her eyes. "I'm joking. Your dad knows that." Then she kissed him on the cheek and drifted back toward her friends. 10 minutes later, Caleb asked me to walk with him to my truck. We crossed the hotel parking lot in silence, the music from the terrace fading behind us. At my old Ford, he stopped with one hand on the bed rail and looked toward the building to make sure no one had followed. "Dad," he said quietly, "Vanessa or her father may put papers in front of you tonight or tomorrow morning. Don't sign anything." I stared at him. "What kind of papers?" He shook his head. "I can't explain yet. You're getting married in 16 hours. "I know. Then explain now." His eyes went toward the hotel again. "Please, just trust me until tomorrow." I had taught Caleb never to ask for trust when facts would do. So hearing those words from him made something cold settle in my stomach. "Are you in trouble?" I asked. "No." "Is Vanessa?" He took too long to answer. I don't know how much she understands. That was worse. I stepped closer. "Son, if you know something that could stop this wedding, you tell me before you stand in front of 200 people and make vows." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm trying to find out whether it stops a wedding or sends someone to prison." Then he leaned closer and lowered his voice until I could barely hear him over the wind off the harbor. "Tomorrow changes everything, Dad. But only if they think we don't know yet." I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and demand the whole truth. Instead, I studied his face. He was 36 years old, a civil engineer who had spent 14 years designing bridges from Bangor to Boston. He was not impulsive. He was not dramatic. Most importantly, he was not weak, though Vanessa's way of talking around him had begun making me wonder whether love had dulled something in him. That night, I realized it had not. He was scared. I nodded once. No signatures. His shoulders dropped a fraction. "Thank you." I drove home alone with the taste of Vanessa's words still in my mouth and my son's warning louder than the radio. When I reached the boatyard, The security light over the office door was on. I had left it off. The front gate was locked, but a white envelope had been pushed through the mail slot. Inside was a typed note from Cole Harbor Development requesting that I review and execute an updated temporary access acknowledgement before noon the next day. It said the document concerned shuttle traffic for the wedding. The language was harmless enough to make me suspicious. I had spent 38 years as a county surveyor before retiring, and another 20 on and off doing boundary consulting for people who thought a fence line was something you could guess at by looking. Nobody used the phrase temporary access acknowledgement unless they wanted a piece of land to sound less important than it was. I turned on my office lamp, opened the envelope again, and found a folded survey exhibit behind the signature page. The first thing I noticed was the north arrow. The second was the scale. The third made me sit down. Someone had drawn a 40-foot wide access corridor directly across Bennett Marine Works from the county road to the inner harbor, and beneath it, in tiny print, were the words proposed perpetual easement. There was nothing temporary about it. I reached for my old reading glasses, pulled the sheet closer, and found my name printed below a signature line I had not signed. Then I found the date of the underlying survey. It was from 3 months earlier. Somebody had been planning to use my land long before anyone asked me to acknowledge anything. I did not call Caleb. That was the hardest part of the night. Instead, I locked the office, carried the envelope upstairs to the apartment over the machine shop, and made coffee strong enough to keep an engine running. At 67, I no longer trusted myself to make complicated decisions after midnight, but I trusted paper. Paper has habits. People lie with their voices, their faces, their promises, but documents leave fingerprints. I spread the survey over my dining table and took out the old property files Ellen and I had kept since 1983. Bennett Marine Works occupied just under 4 acres along the southern harbor inlet, but the valuable part was not the acreage. It was the narrow strip touching deep water. Most of the surrounding shoreline was too shallow for larger vessels at low tide. Our access reached a natural channel dredged generations ago, and the deed included a recorded right to maintain it. Developers had offered me money before. I had refused because once high-end condominiums came in, the working boats went out. What bothered me about the new exhibit was that the proposed easement did not simply cross my lot. It lined up perfectly with an old county planning map showing a future resort parcel owned by a company called North Quay Holdings. I recognized the name because 2 years earlier Richard Cole had spoken at a chamber luncheon about transforming Camden's underutilized industrial waterfront. At the time, I thought he was just another rich man describing other people's livelihoods as clutter. Now I pulled up the public assessor database and found North Quay Holdings listed as the owner of 6 parcels behind mine. Those parcels had no direct deep water access. Without my strip, their luxury hotel plan could build rooms, restaurants, and parking lots, but they could not build the private ferry dock Richard had been advertising to investors. I stared at the map until 1 in the morning. Then I noticed something even stranger. The legal description attached to the access acknowledgement referenced Book 2147, page 318 at the Knox County Registry of Deeds. My current deed was recorded in Book 1982, page 76. Book 2147 belonged to a later filing. I drove to the county courthouse the moment it opened at 8. I had spent most of my career in that building. People had changed. Computers had replaced ledgers, and the old brass scales on the first floor wall were gone, but the smell of paper and floor wax was the same. The deputy registrar, Susan Bell, had been a junior clerk when I retired. She looked over her glasses when I placed the reference number on the counter. "Arthur Bennett," she said. "If you're here voluntarily before 9 in the morning, something's wrong. I hope I'm just getting old and paranoid." "You were paranoid at 45. What do you need?" She pulled the record. The filing had been submitted electronically 6 weeks earlier by a title service in Portland. It was labeled a corrective boundary agreement between Bennett Marine Works and North Quay Holdings. My heart began beating harder. I had never signed a corrective boundary agreement. Susan rotated the monitor. There, halfway down the page, was my name in a cursive imitation, close enough to fool someone who had only seen my signature once. It granted North Key a permanent access easement over the same 40-foot corridor I had seen the night before. It also claimed the agreement corrected an historic survey ambiguity. There was no ambiguity. I had personally surveyed that boundary in 1991 after a storm shifted 3 granite markers. My field book still existed. "Who notarized this?" I asked. Susan scrolled. The acknowledgement bore the stamp of a mobile notary named Patrice Young. I wrote the name down. Then I looked at the signature again. "Is this recorded?" "Provisionally," Susan said. The title service submitted it with an affidavit stating the original would follow. "There's an administrative hold because the witness block is incomplete." I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. "So it isn't final. It creates a cloud. It doesn't make the problem disappear. Who gets notified?" "Normally both owners." "I got nothing." Susan's expression changed. She clicked another tab. Notification address for Bennett Marine Works was changed on the filing. She read it aloud. It was a mailbox rental in Portland. I did not know whether to laugh or curse. Instead, I asked for certified copies. On my way out, my phone rang. Vanessa. I considered ignoring it, then answered. "Arthur, where are you?" "Running errands. We're trying to finalize the wedding transportation plan. Dad's lawyer says there is one simple access form you haven't signed." I saw it. "Great. Can you bring it to the hotel?" "No." Silence. Then the sweetness drained from her voice. "Why not?" "Because I don't sign documents before reading them." She gave a small laugh. "It's a shuttle easement for one day." "Is it?" Another silence. This one lasted longer. "Caleb said you might be difficult." I knew my son had said no such thing. Then Caleb knows me. "Arthur, this wedding is costing my family almost $250,000. We have guests, vendors, transportation. Please don't turn a simple logistical issue into another one of your principles." "My principles have survived worse things than a wedding." She hung up. I sat in my truck outside the courthouse, staring at the phone. 5 seconds later, a text came from Caleb. "Do not reply to her about the property." I typed back, "I found a recorded easement with my forged signature." The typing bubbles appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally he sent, "I know. Meet me at the Boatyard. Come alone." Caleb arrived 20 minutes later, in an old rental sedan, instead of his own truck. He parked inside the machine shed and closed the sliding door behind him before climbing the stairs to my office. The minute he saw the certified documents on my desk, whatever hope he had of easing me into the truth disappeared. He sat down and covered his face with both hands. "How long?" I asked. 3 weeks since I knew it involved your land. 2 months since I knew something was wrong." I stayed standing. "Start at the beginning." He looked up. "Vanessa asked me in May to review some structural plans for her father's waterfront project. She said they were still conceptual. I noticed the service road crossed your parcel. I told her the plan was impossible without your consent. She said her father already had an understanding with you. He didn't. I know that now. At the time I assumed maybe you two had talked and you hadn't mentioned it. That stung, but it was reasonable. I had kept small business matters to myself before." Caleb continued. "Then one night I saw an email on her laptop from Richard's attorney. It said the Bennett easement was being handled through correction, not purchase. That word bothered me. Correction. I asked Vanessa what it meant. She said an old survey error had been discovered. There wasn't one. That's what I learned. I pulled your original property map from the county GIS archive. Then I found the filed agreement. I thought maybe somebody had forged your signature, but I didn't know whether Vanessa knew. She knew enough to call me difficult this morning." Caleb's face tightened. "Dad, there's more." He slid his phone across the desk. On the screen was a photograph of a commission agreement between Vanessa Cole, licensed real estate broker, and North Quay Holdings. She was entitled to receive $640,000 when the harbor access became legally effective and the development financing closed. I read it twice. $640,000, plus an equity option in the hotel. "When did you find this?" 9 days ago. I looked at him. 9 days. And you were still going to marry her today? No. The word came fast. I haven't been planning to marry her since I found this. Then why is there still a wedding? He stood and began pacing. Because Richard's company has a lender inspection scheduled at the reception. They're bringing 2 investors in from New York who think the access issue is resolved. Their entire financing package depends on that easement. If I confronted Vanessa last week, Richard would withdraw the filing, blame some title clerk, destroy whatever communications exist, and rebuild the deal later. I needed proof connecting Vanessa directly to the fraud. So you let them believe the wedding was happening? Yes. And you let her insult me last night. His eyes dropped. I hated that. But you let it happen. For 10 minutes, Dad. Then I warned you. After she called Ellen's life's work worthless in front of a room full of people, his head came up. I know. For several seconds, I was not angry about the land or the forged signature. I was angry because my son had chosen strategy over defending me in a moment when I wanted him simply to be my son. Then I remembered his face in the parking lot. Fear, not weakness. You should have told me sooner, I said. I know. I might still be furious about that next month. I know. But keep talking. He nodded. 2 days ago, I got the direct proof. Vanessa's younger brother, Owen, called me. He handles IT for one of Richard's smaller companies. He knew something had been wrong for months. He thought it was just aggressive title work until he saw your name on a file and remembered meeting you last Christmas. He sent me 3 emails from Vanessa to her father. Caleb opened another folder. The first email discussed getting Arthur through the acknowledgement without triggering another survey review. The second said, once Caleb and I are married, handling his father becomes easier because Arthur won't risk losing his only son over a strip of dirty waterfront. The third made my hands go cold. If he refuses at the wedding, Patrice can backdate the witness affidavit, and we proceed under the filed correction. I leaned back in my chair. Patrice Young, the notary. Caleb nodded. Owen also sent me an internal message where Richard tells Vanessa the lender only needs the easement to survive title review until closing. After that, they can fight you in court for years while construction moves forward. I looked toward the window at the boatyard below. One of our old travel lifts stood beside the water. Yellow paint faded almost white from salt and sun. When Caleb was 12, Ellen had painted his handprint inside the control cab. It was still there. These people did not want an easement. They wanted time. Once tens of millions were poured into concrete, they planned to turn my rights into a nuisance. A judge would be pressured to solve with money. Who else knows? I asked. Owen, my attorney, a state investigator with the Real Estate Commission. Susan Bell now, apparently, because you went to the registry. Good. Dad, I need you to do something you're going to hate. I've already worn a suit 2 nights in a row. My tolerance is low. For the first time that morning, he almost smiled. Go to the wedding. As what? My father. You're not getting married. No. But Vanessa doesn't know that yet. I stared at him. What exactly are you planning? Caleb took a breath. Richard's attorney is going to present the access form before the ceremony, probably in the library suite. I need them to explain what they think you're signing, while our lawyer and investigator listen from the adjoining room. If they say it's temporary and harmless while knowing it creates permanent access, that's evidence of intent. Then we stop everything before anyone walks down the aisle. You want me to let them lie to my face? Yes, that's not hard. They already do it for free. Dad. I understand. I picked up the commission agreement again. And Vanessa? His expression changed. He had loved her. Whatever else was true, that remained true. I want her to have one chance to tell the truth before I show her what I have. Why? Because I need to know whether there was ever a moment when she was the person I thought she was. I wanted to tell him not to waste his time. Instead, I remembered being 36 and making mistakes because I could not imagine a future without the person standing beside me. Then give her the chance, I said. But don't confuse an explanation with an excuse. Caleb nodded. Before he left, I stopped him at the door. Son, he turned. Yesterday I thought you were letting her choose how much respect I was allowed to have in your life. Pain crossed his face. I never meant that. Meaning and doing are different things. He swallowed. I know. Then today, whatever happens, make your own choice before somebody else makes it for you. He left without answering, but I did not need one. At 11:45, I walked into the Harbor Crest Hotel wearing the dark blue suit Ellen bought me for Caleb's college graduation. The lobby was full of flowers, harp music, and people pretending the day was uncomplicated. Vanessa's relatives filled the seating area with garment bags and champagne. Several smiled at me as though the previous night's insult had been a small social inconvenience we had all agreed to forget. Richard Cole approached near the staircase with a lawyer named Martin Shaw at his side. Richard wore a gray morning suit and the relaxed expression of a man who believed the most dangerous part of his day was weather. "Arthur," he said, shaking my hand with both of his. "I'm glad you're here. Vanessa was worried you might be upset after last night." "About what?" I asked. He blinked. "You know how young people joke. I'm too old to understand humor." He laughed louder than necessary. "Well, there is one administrative issue we should clear up before the ceremony. Nothing significant. The access form." His eyes brightened. "Exactly. Martin has it ready upstairs." He guided me toward a private library off the ballroom. The room had leather chairs, shelves of books no hotel guest had ever opened, and a long walnut table. On it sat the same document I had received the night before, except this copy had yellow tabs marking the signature lines. Martin Shaw spoke in the patient tone professionals use when they want an older person to feel slow. "Mr. Bennett, this simply confirms temporary passage across a portion of your property for wedding-related vehicles and future municipal access discussions. It does not transfer ownership." "Future municipal access discussions?" I asked. Richard stepped in. "Possibly a public benefit later. Nothing binding today." I looked at the map. "This says perpetual easement." Martin's smile tightened. "That's standard drafting language associated with the survey exhibit. The operative acknowledgement is temporary." "Then why not remove perpetual?" "Because the exhibit was prepared for multiple potential uses." End book 2147. Page 318. Martin looked at Richard. It lasted less than a second, but I saw it. "That's simply the recording reference for a preliminary correction," he said. "A correction I signed? A clerical submission? Yes. So, I already agreed?" Richard leaned forward. "Arthur, nobody is trying to trick you. This is about keeping everything smooth today." I sat back and folded my hands. "My son said Vanessa would be upset if I caused trouble." Richard smiled. "Exactly. You're gaining a daughter today. That's worth a little flexibility, isn't it?" There it was. Not a threat. Something better. An admission of leverage. I picked up the pen. "If I don't sign?" Richard sighed. "I suppose the wedding proceeds. But it creates unnecessary complications. Vanessa might take it personally. Caleb is already under a lot of stress. A father should think carefully before putting property between himself and his son." I set the pen down. The door to the adjoining room opened. Caleb stepped in first. Behind him came Owen Cole, pale but steady, then a woman I recognized from Augusta as investigator Marlene Pierce of the Maine Real Estate Commission, and finally Caleb's attorney, Daniel Ross. Richard's face changed so slowly, I almost admired his effort to stop it. Martin Shaw stood. "What is this?" Caleb closed the door. "Dad," he said, looking at me, "don't sign." "I wasn't planning to." Richard looked from his son to mine. "Caleb, this is wildly inappropriate. Your bride is upstairs waiting?" "No," Caleb said. "She's waiting for a financing close." Richard's face hardened. "You have no idea what you're talking about. I know Vanessa's commission is $640,000. I know North Key's loan commitment expires Monday. I know the lender requires recorded deep water access. And I know somebody filed a corrective easement with my father's forged signature." Martin Shaw began gathering his papers. Investigator Pierce said, "Leave the documents on the table." He froze. Richard turned on Owen. "What did you do?" Owen's hands shook, but he did not look away. "I stopped helping you hide things." Richard swore under his breath. Then the library door opened again, and Vanessa walked in wearing her wedding gown. Someone must have called her. She looked from me to Caleb to her father, then at the investigator. What is happening? Caleb's face went white, but his voice stayed level. I want to ask you one question before anyone else speaks. Did you know the easement filed under my father's name was forged? She stared at him. What? Did you know? Caleb, my father handled the property documents. That's not an answer. Her eyes moved to Richard. Dad? Richard said. Don't say anything. That was the worst possible thing he could have said. Vanessa's face tightened. Caleb pulled out his phone. I have your emails. She stopped breathing for a second. What emails? The one where you said after we were married it would be easier to handle Dad because he wouldn't risk losing me over dirty waterfront. Tears filled her eyes instantly, but they did not soften me. Caleb, listen to me. That was taken out of context. Then give me the context. My father said the project would die without access. Hundreds of jobs, millions in investment. Your father wouldn't even discuss it. So you forged his name? I didn't forge anything, but you knew. She looked toward her father again. I knew they were fixing a survey issue. Caleb held her gaze. That's your chance, Vanessa. Right now. Tell me the truth without checking his face first. The room became silent. For a few seconds, I watched the woman who had been hours away from becoming my daughter-in-law to decide which life she wanted. Then she said, I knew the signature wasn't his. Caleb closed his eyes. Vanessa rushed on. But Dad said it was temporary. He said it would only force negotiations. He said Arthur would get paid once financing closed. Nobody was stealing the boatyard. Richard snapped. Vanessa. She turned on him. You told me no one would get hurt. Investigator Pierce wrote something down. Caleb opened his eyes again. And the commission? Vanessa wiped tears from her cheek. I earned that deal. By using me. No. I love you. Then why was marrying me part of your access strategy? It wasn't. Your email says it was easier after marriage. Because your father listens to you. I finally spoke. You never asked me. Vanessa looked at me. For the first time since I had known her, there was no polish left. Would you have said yes? Probably not. Then what difference would asking have made? I felt something inside me go still. All of it, I said. Asking is the difference between business and theft. She stared at me as if the idea had never occurred to her. Caleb removed the small velvet ring box from his pocket and placed it on the table. Vanessa's mouth opened. Caleb, don't do this here. Where should I do it? After the ceremony? We can fix this. You tried to use my father's love for me as leverage against him. I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to mail a form. This took months. She stepped toward him. Please. He moved back. I loved you. That's why I needed you to tell the truth before I showed you the evidence. You did, eventually. But only after you knew I had it. Vanessa began crying harder. Richard tried to interrupt, but Investigator Pierce told him not to leave. Caleb looked at Vanessa for a long time, then said, There is no wedding today. She covered her mouth. Outside the library, somewhere down the hall, the string quartet continued playing because nobody had told them yet. The next hour was uglier than the confrontation because real consequences rarely arrive with dramatic music. Hotel staff quietly moved guests from the ceremony lawn into the ballroom while Caleb and Vanessa's wedding coordinator tried to decide what could be canceled, refunded, or salvaged. Rumors traveled faster than truth. Some people thought Caleb had cheated. Others thought I had refused to give him money. Vanessa's aunt cornered me near the elevator and said I had ruined a young woman's life over some old repair yard. I told her, No, ma'am. I refused to sign my name to someone else's lie. She walked away before I finished. Richard Cole spent most of the afternoon with his attorney and investigator Pierce. The county registry placed an immediate fraud hold on the corrective easement. North Quay's lender, once notified by Caleb's attorney that the access document was disputed, suspended the closing. Owen turned over company emails and server logs. Patrice Young, the mobile notary, initially claimed she had witnessed my signature over video, but the metadata on her acknowledgement placed her in Portland while I was documented at a town planning meeting in Camden. That detail would matter later. At 3 in the afternoon, I found Caleb alone on the hotel's back steps, still wearing his tuxedo, tie loosened, watching boats cross the harbor. I sat beside him. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, he said, "I kept thinking she would tell me there was some part I misunderstood. You wanted a door to stay open." "Yeah, that's normal." He looked at me. "Are you angry with me?" "Yes." He gave a humorless laugh. "Fair. I'm also proud of you." His eyes dropped. "Those can both be true. I should have told you as soon as I knew." "Yes. I thought protecting the investigation meant protecting you. Sometimes it did. Sometimes you were protecting the plan." He nodded slowly. "I know." I leaned my elbows on my knees. "Your mother used to say there are two kinds of secrets in a family. The kind you keep for someone and the kind you keep from someone. The first can be love. The second usually becomes trouble." Caleb looked out at the water. "What do I do now?" "Today?" I asked. "Take off uncomfortable shoes. Eat something. Sleep somewhere nobody expects you to answer questions. And tomorrow? Same thing, probably. Healing isn't a construction schedule." He smiled faintly. "You always hated schedules." "I hated engineers pretending weather cared about schedules." He laughed then, one short surprised sound, and for the first time that day, he looked like my son instead of a man standing in the ruins of his future. Before we left, he said, "Dad, I need you to know something. I wasn't choosing Vanessa over you. I know that now. Last night, when she said those things, I wanted to end it right there." "Why didn't you?" "Because I knew Richard's attorney was coming with the papers today, and Daniel said we needed them to explain the document while we had witnesses. I told myself 10 minutes of silence was worth stopping them permanently." I looked at him. "Maybe it was strategically, but not as your son." "No," he nodded. "I'm sorry." That apology mattered more than I expected, because he did not defend himself after giving it. I put a hand on his shoulder. "Next time somebody insults your father at your wedding rehearsal, try not to schedule an investigation around it. There won't be a next wedding rehearsal for a while." "Good. They're expensive." We went home together to the boatyard. At dusk, he changed out of his tuxedo and helped me replace a cracked hydraulic hose on the travel lift. He had not done mechanical work with me in years. Neither of us talked about Vanessa. We did not need to. Sometimes, grief needs a wrench more than words. 6 months later, North Quay Holdings abandoned the luxury harbor project. Richard Cole was charged with multiple counts related to fraudulent recording, conspiracy, and attempted title fraud. His attorney claimed Richard had relied on outside consultants, but the emails made that difficult. Patrice Young surrendered her notary commission and later pleaded to falsifying an acknowledgement in exchange for cooperation. Vanessa was not charged with forging my signature, because investigators could not prove she had created the document. But the state suspended her real estate license pending disciplinary review after determining she had participated in misleading communications connected to the transaction. She and Caleb never reconciled. She wrote him 2 letters. He answered one, not to restart the relationship, but to close it without cruelty. I respected him for that. Owen found a job with another company in Portland and testified against his father's version of events, even though it cost him most of his family relationships. As for Bennett Marine Works, I did something nobody expected. I placed the property into a conservation and working waterfront trust that guaranteed commercial marine access after I was gone. I also sold a small inland portion, not the waterfront, to fund an apprenticeship program for young mechanics, welders, and marine technicians. Caleb helped design the new training building. We named it the Ellen Bennett Workshop. On the day we opened it, 27 people stood inside a bright, clean space that had once been a storage shed full of rusted propellers and broken outboards. Above the main workbench hung a photograph of Ellen in 1987, hair tied back with a red bandana, holding baby Caleb on one hip while writing an invoice with the other hand. Caleb stood beside me, looking at it. "Mom would have liked this," he said. "She would have complained the tool lockers are too expensive." "You bought the expensive ones." "Exactly. We watched a 17-year-old apprentice struggle with a seized bolt until another student showed him how to heat the fitting without damaging the housing. Outside, fishing boats moved through the same deep water channel Richard Cole had tried to claim with a piece of paper. I had spent months thinking the victory was keeping my property. It wasn't. Land can be sold. Buildings rot. Money moves. The real victory was that nobody else got to decide what my life with Ellen had meant. Nobody got to turn my son's love into leverage against me. Nobody got to call dishonesty progress and expect me to sign beneath it. Caleb and I still argued sometimes about those weeks before the wedding. He believed waiting had been necessary. I believed he waited 2 days too long. We could disagree because the truth no longer threatened us. One evening after the apprentices left, we sat on the dock with coffee while the sun went down behind the harbor. Caleb said, "You know what I keep thinking about? That your father was right?" I was going to say Vanessa's toast. Mine is better. He shook his head. She said your marina was worthless. I looked at the shop lights, coming on one by one behind us. People usually call something worthless when they want it cheap. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I almost lost you trying to prove I could save you." I turned toward him. "You didn't almost lose me. It felt like it. Son, I never needed you to choose me over the woman you loved. I needed you to choose the truth once you knew what she was doing." He looked down at his coffee. "I did. Eventually." He smiled. "You couldn't leave that part out. I'm old. Repetition is one of my privileges." The harbor went dark slowly around us. Somewhere across the water, a bell rang from a lobster boat returning late. I thought about how close I had come to signing a page that would have changed everything Ellen and I had built, and how easily the people behind it had mistaken restraint for weakness. Age had taught me something youth never could. The loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest one. Sometimes strength is reading the small print. Sometimes it is refusing a signature. Sometimes it is telling your son you are angry while still leaving the porch light on for him. And sometimes the most important thing you can protect is not the property someone is trying to take, but the relationship they were willing to use to take it.